We don't show up so much in creativity for creativity's sake, like just as a medium of expression or just sitting down and tinkering,
Do we actively use this creativity? That one I'm not so sure.
making space for being and holding that ideas galore in our heads.
But then again, it takes intentionality to really set aside time and want to cultivate that creativity and give yourself that space to do that for its sake.
If we don't encourage enough of the small, then how does it roll up to the big?
The first step is really to just try and experiment.
Go big or go home. Welcome to Halopod-cast, where we explore the transformative power of leadership through Halogen's attributes framework. We're your hosts, Ivy and RaeAnne, and in this series, The Inner and Outer Leader, we'll dive into key leadership qualities like emotional intelligence, resilience, effective communication, and how they can shape the leaders of tomorrow.
Whether you're an educator, a parent, a mentor, or someone who guides the next generation, this podcast is here to equip you with practical insights and actionable tools to support young people as they navigate the world and become the leaders they're meant to be. Today, we're continuing our exploration of the outer domains of external mastery, attributes that address the skills for influencing people and situations.
Our domain of focus for this episode is creative innovation, where we discuss how creative thinking enables us to view things in new light, look for deeper meaning, understand the big picture of things, and generate new ideas.
Have you ever been told that you're not the creative type, or when was the last time you felt like you had a light bulb moment? If you're ready to learn, grow, and make an impact, let's dive in together.
So, creative innovation is all about cultivating the ability to generate original ideas, transform them into practical and valuable solutions. It involves thinking outside the box, experimenting with new approaches, and adapting to changing circumstances. This domain equips young people with skills to navigate complexity, solve problems in new ways, and lead positive change by pushing boundaries and embracing experimentation. So, you know what? We're going to start off with the $1,000,000 question. RaeAnne, do you think Singaporean youths are creative?
Actually, I think that they are creative, but do we actively use this creativity? That one I'm not so sure. So I think we are creative because I mean you've seen like we have local musicians, right? Like maybe Shazza is one of them. I know because Shazza is an alumni from my school, but yeah, I mean they're artists like that and but then the reason why I say it, maybe we're not very creative at the same time is because I think we're a bit afraid to experiment. We're a bit afraid to go outside of what's the norm. And I think in that way we're a bit like conservative with our ideas, and so maybe for that aspect, I think we're still lacking a little bit in that area.
Understand. I unpack it a bit more. So what we're saying is also that, when we are looking for new ways to solve problems, I think as a competency, we feel that we're a country, both young and adults, that are creative in that aspect, but we may not be as a culture so willing to fail because part of creativity comes with trying, and trying doesn't always work, right? Okay, so you have a positive outlook with that. I was polling my team members, the fellow adults, about the same question, right? And then there were some perspectives that I thought was really interesting. One dimension of looking at creativity was that we think Singaporeans are creative, but we're creative with a purpose and a goal. So we're always very mission focused. If there's something to solve, there's something to, I don't know, come out with a product that can solve a situation or a problem. Those are things where creativity shows up. We don't show up so much in creativity for creativity's sake, like just as a medium of expression or just sitting down and tinkering. Like, when was the last time you feel like you sat down to tinker? Because I know I'm guilty. I'm not doing that very often. But what about for young people? Like,
I think creativity is something that I really want to explore more of and practice more for myself. But I think I relate to you when you say that you like we don't really like sit down and think about how we can be creative about something for creativity's sake. It's like, okay, if there's a try and tested method, we'll just go with that. But I think I think that's something honestly on my heart I want to do more. Like to just be creative. Yeah, and this can come about not only with like coming up with ideas or solutions, but I think just like in expressing yourself, how can you be more creative? Yeah, I think that's something that I want to think about more.
no, interestingly, what came to my mind suddenly was I read up on creativity books before, and there was this particular author of a book where she was I'm sorry, I forgot her name, but she actually is a creative director where she writes scripts and puts together plays and all. And as part of that creativity and artistic element of it, there are actually um practices where they advocate for things like doing a 4-page journaling. Have you heard of that framework?
4 page, no.
So it's something like a practice where every day you wake up when your mind is still considered relatively empty, like you don't have to start thinking about your to-do list and what calendar meetings that you go to, but you just wake up, you open a journal, and you just do continuous writing for 4 full pages. Whatever that comes to your mind, just throw it out and let it flow. And that discipline, so interestingly, in most of these books that I read that encourage creativity, there are certain disciplines that are structured around that where I see it as and interpret it as making space to not just go down a lane of what do I have to do and solve, but just making space for being and holding that ideas galore in our heads, and also having that practice of putting it down to paper or in conversation such that it has opportunity to be shaped and reshaped over time. One of the perspectives from the people that I polled was talking about how we're actually very process creative. Like if we have a mission and a goal to achieve, we can find many ways to do that. Um, Curious, how do you feel like the creativity muscle or skill is like being developed in your day to day as a young person? Like, do you find that it's something that you can constantly nurture? I mean, you alluded to the fact that it's something that I want to do more of, but like, are there avenues or accessible frameworks to actually do something about it?
I think that there's two aspects of this for me. So the first one is that because I study communications in uni. So I mean one part of a lot of what I study is how to be creative and how to bring a message across creatively. And so in that aspect, I'm given the time and space to do that and to ideate. But I think on a personal basis, like being creative for creative sake, I think one way or one avenue for me is that I really like pictures and videos. Yeah, and so for me, like either like editing or like just like curating, or actually I love writing too. So it's like all of these are ways for me to express my creativity. But then again, it takes intentionality to really set aside time and want to cultivate that creativity and give yourself that space to do that for its sake. Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. This topic today that's challenging for the both of us is this word means many things to many people, and we all know aspirationally it's an important domain because that's where new ideas come from. That's where we can get better and challenge the process and come up with new things. So what we're gonna do today is also gonna be a bit different, where we are gonna debunk some myths or get some yay or nay responses from the both of us about certain myths around creativity or innovation. So how it's gonna work is that we read off a myth here and then we'll just share spontaneously our thoughts. Yeah? We're game? Okay, I'm gonna get started. The first myth that I have here is only artists are creative. What's your response instinctively to that?
I think I think definitely not. I mean, create because like as you mentioned earlier, creativity is such a broad term, right? I mean, I don't think it is something that is only for those who are born with it. I acknowledge certainly that there are people who are extra creative and they have that flair about them. But I think creativity is very much a skill that can be built over time. Like as we mentioned earlier about all the ways that we can cultivate creativity, right? I think that it is not only for a select few people, it's not only for people who do this as their job or yeah, but or what they study, but it is something for everyone. And I think because creativity comes in like many forms. It's not just like creative in terms of arts. It can be creative in terms of like solutions or just like yeah, all these ways.
I love that. And you display the maturity that I didn't have when I was a young person. I grew up taking the more science track. My undergraduate degree was in engineering. For the longest of my life, if you ask me, am I creative? I'll probably say no. I'm an engineer. I solve problems, and here's my logic chain. But if you ask me now, I think I recognize that one blind spot that I'm inadvertently shutting the door out for myself, is putting myself in the box where I exist to see creativity only as an attribute that the art students do really well, because they can come up with creative or artistic things they discuss, whereas an engineer is trained to really think of the logic chain and solve the problem, right? But having been in the workplace and having to see some of these attributes or skill sets show up, then I'll say, fast forward now after a decade of working, if you ask me now if I'm creative, I think actually I'm going to venture a guess to say, yeah, I am. It's a different kind of creativity, exactly to what you've alluded to. It's also about just seeing things differently and coming up with new perspectives that can bring a new, fresh lens for whatever that's around. Cool. You go next.
Okay, my turn. Ooh, okay. Creativity just happens. You can't work on it. Wow.
Okay, because I mentioned I'm a engineering trained. I was like, everything has a process. Personally, I think it's also how we do best in different environments. I think there are some people who get creativity sparked by certain routines, being, in nature, in discussions, in environments. For me, you can work on it because I have to have a structure to build it. Um, we at Halogen in this leadership challenge program actually talk about a little bit about creativity in the context of outside. So you have insights, right, where you kind of operate in the environment and you come up with new ideas. But outside really talks about looking out of the box, where in places that you may not have assumed that you will find a solution, and kind of marrying some of these perspectives together, connecting the dots and go, wait, actually just seeing it from a different angle brings a new idea, i.e. it's creative. Fun fact, I don't know about you, whether you know how post-it notes came about.
Um, I've heard briefly, but yeah, maybe you could
Yeah.
remind me.
So it was actually, in a nutshell, an accident, because what the 3M scientist was actually intending to develop is a super strong adhesive, right? Post-its are not, but it was meant to be an experimentation to come up with a really strong adhesive to use for aircraft purposes. And in the experimental process, it kind of failed, so it's not very adhesive. And then he kept the prototype. He was like, okay, what else can I use with it? And apparently, the story goes where he was asking his colleague decided to use that to actually make a modification on a bookmark, because he wanted to put it in the book, but it wouldn't drop out. So, and you don't need it to be super adhesive, right? Because it will spoil the book. And that led to the development of post-its. And post-its are like, one of your run of the mill tools that you have to use on a daily basis. And I think the learning from that is just that, you never know. Like sometimes when you try and then you just marry different ideas together, it became an innovation, but it wasn't the original intent. It was a consequence. So there are ways, I think, I firmly believe that there are ways that you can build a routine and work on it. You may not get directly results all the time, but it's also the process that will do its work also if you hunker down and build that discipline.
I think what I appreciate about, like, yes, there are a lot of accidental innovations that come about, like for example that post-it note thing. But I think one commonality that all these accidental innovations have is because they were already experimenting to do something already. So they already took that first step to try. And I think that that's something we can all adapt. Like, yeah, we like the first step is really to just try and experiment. And then whatever solution comes out of it, yeah, that's the innovation right there.
On hindsight, we don't do that enough as a culture, right? We always want to make sure we nail it the first shot and then we launch it and then it's cool. Okay, I have the next one. If it's not the latest tech gadget or invention, it's not really innovation. What is your take on that?
Ooh. I think when we very naturally when we think of the word innovation, we always think of somehow we always relate it to technology, or we always relate it to something digital. Um, but actually, I think innovation can come in so many ways. I mean, we also learned, or we also know about the logic that actually innovation is just like taking ideas and putting it into action. And so, I mean, we can all think about what that looks like to us, what kind of ideas. But I believe that as long as we take like an idea that we have and we are willing enough to try it and experiment it and put it into action, I think that is considered innovative in itself already. I remember in I remember in secondary school, we have like those D&T mods, like design and technology mods. Those are like spaces for us to innovate also, right? And then we did like the whole like design thinking model, find a pain point, and then yeah, and then like my group, we came up with like with like a special spoon. I mean, I think it was like it was just a special spoon to and it was in regards to some problem that we were trying to solve. But yeah, I think that in itself, right? I mean, it has nothing to do with technology. But I thought it was quite innovative. So yeah, I think definitely not just to do with like the latest technology. Yeah. What about you?
I agree. I love the perspective because as you were articulating, then I think upon introspection, it's probably that. I mean, as a environment and society, we're quite good at structuring things, right? So you want to teach creativity, here's a framework here. You want to teach innovation. What inadvertently happens is that we forget that sometimes the irony is that we've put creativity and innovation in boxes. Because as you reflect upon the question of whether it's just equivalent to inventions and gadgets and digital tools, I think the answer is not. But sometimes we are so good at structuring certain categories of things. So, in encouragement, is probably that creativity and innovation resides all around. Like, even if we do something at home, like maybe I'm creative about the way I do my housework and I'm not aware of it because I just have this certain routine that works and I'm thinking outside the box, but it just doesn't get put into the label of I am creative. So, I think that's an important bit because once we have a mindset shift in that, then I think we're also able to flourish and grow a little bit more in that. Yeah, so that's a good one.
I think like yeah, I think it's a lot about like we don't have to think about it so big. Like it can just be actually our day to day, like what you say about being creative with your chores, right? I mean, yeah, like actually why can't that also be creative? Yeah, yeah. Okay, the next one is to innovate, you need to change the world in one big move.
So you answered the
Yeah,
question
I just
before.
answered the question before.
No, I think exactly. I will contextualize this also in the observation when we work with young people. Like when you come up with very innovative or new causes, I think sometimes there is this inadvertent sense of like go big or go home. And if it's not big enough to be reported in the news as the latest young person started this, then sometimes we don't give ourselves permission just to venture. I I guess I appreciate that the idea is to really make a dent, but I would also caution to say like let's not diminish the little things that add up. And if I draw the parallel back to influence, influence is about making one person's life better, not just about changing the world or else, right? So I do feel that reflecting upon how creativity and innovation shows up, we might need a really different mindset shift into how we see these attributes as like a go big or go home kind of attribute.
Yeah. I think one thing that we often overlook because we expect so much of ourselves to be like, let's create the most amazing invention today. I think what we overlook is also like actually create innovation or creativity can also just be like incremental improvements. Like, okay, today I'm gonna do this creatively, and then like that, that will culminate into like more and more, like I guess a greater invention each day or greater innovation each day. It's just I think it's about actively using it, and it can be small, so it doesn't have to be one big move. Yeah.
Do you think we call out the good incremental creativity or initiatives enough such that we appreciate it and we appreciate it in one another?
I think that's a great thought to have because actually now that you say it, I think we don't affirm it enough. Yeah, I think we always applaud like like what gets on the news. We applaud like those really influential and big solutions, but actually like we also should give credit to like budding innovations and to acknowledge it so that they like us as a society or like youths in general can feel inspired and encouraged to continue. Yeah.
The last one here, only the pros and experts get to innovate.
Only the pros and experts get to innovate. Definitely not. I mean, I think our whole all the myths that we've debunked earlier never had to do anything with just only the experts or only the pros. I think we managed to like focus a lot about how like any individual, regardless of what level of influence you have or what resources you have, can be creative and innovative in our own right. So No, definitely not only for uh experts. So yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, when I read it out, then it came to me also that maybe the pros and experts started somewhere where they were not pros and experts, right? Because I can't imagine that. I mean, there are privileged few where they're born that way and they're just like off the charts in terms of the creativity meter. But I think for the bulk of us, they are generally human. It's also a skill set that we've built up. So if we don't encourage enough of the small, then how does it roll up to the big? But actually, the other thing that I was reflecting upon with this question is then how do we create some of that environment where innovation is more, I don't know whether permissible is a good word, but it's more encouraged. Then again, it might not be the best word because I think we do try to encourage it.
I think what would be great to cultivate like innovation or creativity would be like open and collaborative environments. And how do we create open and collaborative environments? I think it also starts with like creating a safe space for ideas to be bounced off, and that it's okay even if those ideas fail. Yeah, I think what stops a lot of us from trying or from even being creative in the first place is the fear that our ideas will not work out. And the fear that our ideas will not work out, that it won't be acceptable. But actually, in order to know that those ideas won't work out, you have to try and you have to be open to share those ideas. So I think for me, I think what would work is to just create cultivate like a safe space and safe environment for experimentation and failure to happen. Mm.
And it's a lot of inner work that we have to do too,
Yeah.
right? Because one of the earlier episodes that on the podcast is talking about growth mindset. But if I think about the workplace and how the ideas do get tinkered or land or do not land, I would imagine that the bulk of the reason is actually not so much that there isn't permission or platforms, but a lot more about that worry of so what if it fails. And I think maybe that's something that we all have to do the inner work on before the external skill sets of creativity emerge, right?
Yeah. I mean, like we've debunked so many myths, right? So maybe you can talk about how innovation and creativity can be nurtured. And I think um I myself have went on to like search about and just discover, I think along just along my daily life, like what are some good examples of creativity that I've seen around me. And actually it brought me to an example that I've read of in recent times, right? Like I saw this article recently online about this Singaporean designer. So his name is Nicholas Tan, and actually he owns this brand called Open, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. But basically he's known for creating designer bags that are asymmetrical. So that's his model, his main design, right? And actually the thing that made him go viral was the fact that he's a Singaporean, right? He's a Singaporean designer, but his work is worn by like Hollywood artists like Beyonce, Taylor Swift, like huge names, right? But actually his backstory is very interesting. So he used to be a national swimmer for Singapore. He won like I'm pretty sure he won like some medals back in SEA Games. And then he interestingly he went on to study biology at Harvard. So there's also that difference, like, oh, he's a swimmer, okay, he studied biology, but then now he's a designer. So it's like all these things don't seem to line up like in what traditionally he would end up doing, right? But he has got success for himself in this area. And then I think what inspired me from his story was the fact that he wasn't afraid to venture out into something that was different from what maybe society expected of him, or from what he thought was like, the most like this is the most logical path for me to take. But actually, like, no, he experimented. He went somewhere completely different from what he was already doing, and he found that this is where his talent lies and this is where his gift lies. And he managed to find great success with that. So I think it is also about that desire and willingness to experiment and try something new.
That's really cool. That's really cool. And in fact, I think it draws a parallel to some of the other admire stories. Like the one that I had on my list was to talk about this serial entrepreneur called Cynthia Chua. You may not have heard of her, or you may have heard of her, but what's more famous is the different lines of businesses that she's created. So she runs Spa Esprit, Bra House, 40 Hands, Tiong Bahru Bakery, Open Farm Community. It's so diverse, right? And I think when I first got to know about the range of work that she was doing, of course, the Spa Esprit and the strip bra house stories were the ones that were more signature, because it was really like, how do you make something like waxing become a lifestyle brand, right? And if you take a look at some of their products, they have very interesting ways of framing and creating a very engaging brand for something that some people might feel like, hey, why you marketing it, right? Waxing and all. And we actually had the opportunity to interview her for one of the books or charity projects that we published a few years ago. And she actually described, in the context of where do these ideas come from, she actually said, like, actually, I wake up every day with like 25 ideas. Like, I'm just constantly seeing new ideas of what I can do with like this, with that. And it's just a lot of tinkering. Not all the ideas actually came into fruition. She's also known commercially as the girl with the Midas touch, because with her 14 or 16 businesses and counting, there are like 80 to 100 outlets all over the world. And it's just really interesting, because when I met her, she really struck me as someone who was a very strong creative. Like, of course, she needed the business skills to actually make the businesses happen. But it was this, like, when she talked about thinking of new ideas, her eyes just lit up. And in many ways, drawing the parallel is such an athletic background, right? Which makes me wonder, maybe, yeah, the way to pursue creativity might not be just one track mind, like, okay, I want creativity and then I build it. Is, in some of these examples, these are people who dabbled in broad ranges of things, and because of the skill sets and how they just come together, then they create very cool ideas that you and I like envy. Like, oh yeah, why didn't I think of that? I'm curious. Like, I mean, knowing that, then what does that mean for us on our day to day, right? So it could be a reflection upon whatever we've discussed today, but also with some of these entrepreneurs. What are some ways you think, as a youth leading groups, and for me in the workplace, can we maybe do more to cultivate this spirit and muscle of creativity and innovation, because we definitely need that.
Yeah, I think for myself, after hearing our conversation today, right, I think I've been much more inspired to be actively creative for the sake of creativity. Yeah, and like when I think of creativity now, I just acknowledge the fact actually creativity, if you think about it like very simply, it's like deviating from the norm, right? And maybe the norm is just doing everything like how we know and has been tried and tested, but can we actively try and deviate from that and to make it like a practice? And I think that for me going forward now, I think when I work in like either groups or just in my daily life, right, I think I want to think actively about how to be creative. Can I do this creativity creatively? Yeah, and I think that's the question. It's more of a question that I want to take away, like a reflection, so that I can enact it in my daily life. Yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, the original thought that I had was very structural, again, thinking about systems, processes, especially in the context of a working environment. But I think, upon our conversation, like, the reflection I have more for myself is, what are the ways in which I could make this lens and muscle a bit more, um to encourage that, right? I think there's one aspect of encouraging curiosity in what we do, encouraging people to whatever motivates them, right? They want to challenge the norm, they want to just be curious, they want to do something or invent something different and new. But how can we make that very day to day a conversation and so permissible? The part that stuck for me is also reflecting upon how can we build a very tinkerer's mindset, because to get successful innovations, there is no running away from failed experiments too. But I think we don't necessarily do enough. I don't know whether, as a young person, you feel like we encourage for sure, but do we take it really hard when our experiments don't go well? um, so those two thoughts about that environment and that mindset are sticking with me right now, that I think that's going to be so fundamental. Then all the techniques, right? I think as Singaporeans, we're so good at it, right? Design thinking lah, come up with a scrum. I'm not worried about that, but I think it needs to stem from somewhere that is anchored from within, and that's what I am most reflective about, I guess. Yeah. So interestingly, we started out this episode talking about the outer domain of skills, but I think we landed up also with some food for thought about how we should embody the idea of a creative spirit from within as well, right? So creativity and innovation, these aren't just about big ideas. They are really about taking these ideas and turning them into meaningful change, even if it's a small incremental bit. And every young person has the power to imagine differently, experiment boldly, and learn from setbacks. When we break through the myths, welcome diverse views, embrace failure as a stepping stone, we unlock the potential to lead and transform the future, starting with today's actions. So, the one reflection prompt for today: what's one small action you can take this week to step into your creative potential and lead change in your life or community?
If you found today's episode helpful, do share it with a friend, colleague, or fellow leader. Subscribe now so you won't miss our final episode on how we can rally people and enable others to perform, to lead others, and lead change effectively. Also, to give you a little sneak peek into our next episode, we will have Sean and Ella back with us, so we will have all 4 podcasters to come to talk about mobilizing teams. So do stay tuned for that. And with that, keep
Leading inside and out.